We all love stories where the hero wins in the end. And one of my personal favorites comes from the British television show Doctor Who. This show follows the Time Lord, known as the Doctor, as he travels around through time and space in his vehicle called the TARDIS, which looks like a 1960s police call box. 4 years ago now on the show, the Doctor went with friends of his out into Western America. It was there they saw a future version of the Doctor, struck down by a mysterious person in a spacesuit. They thought that this would mean the Doctor's end was coming soon. And so, seeing as they had a time machine, they tried to do all in their power to make sure that this didn't happen. Now, it turns out that this particular event, the death of the Doctor, was what is called a fixed point in time. A period of time that cannot be changed without dire consequences to all of reality itself. And so they thought that that was the end of it, that the Doctor was doomed to die, that it was only a matter of time for it to happen. And so as the Doctor gets ready to prepare for the end, for his oncoming death, he meets up with a former person that he'd met with, which wasn't a person at all. In fact, it was a ship that was able to transform itself into any person throughout all of history. And this ship, run by tiny little people inside of it, would go around and try to right the wrongs of history and deal with the greatest criminals of the past. As the Doctor talks with this robot ship, the ship's captain says to him, "Let us know if there's anything that we can do for you." At this point, the Doctor walks away, but then immediately turns back and says, "Actually, there is one thing." And so the Doctor uses the ship to impersonate himself, so that instead of himself being killed at that moment out west, it is the robot ship instead that is destroyed. These are the kind of stories we love. Heroes who are able to do anything to overcome impending doom upon them, who are able to find themselves out of any deadly trap that might ensnare them. Today in our service, we have a bit of a paradox. On one hand, we do have a victory, like we see from the heroes that we love. We see the victorious entrance of Jesus on the donkey that we celebrated just outside this morning. That victory march on that donkey coming into Jerusalem as the children and other people scream out, "Hosanna in the highest! Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord." But on the other hand, along with this victory, we also have the death that we just read about. The death of Jesus on the cross. On one hand, it seems like we have a story of victory, and yet, on the other hand, a story that seems to be one of failure. But that's the thing with the death of Jesus. It's not really a failure at all. Because Jesus' death was to help us make the great escape. It was to help us escape death. And so in order to save us, to protect us from death, Jesus had to spring the trap himself. Jesus himself had to succumb to death. Jesus couldn't be the victor, sneaking away, finding some way out of the trap. Instead, he had to embrace it for himself. And the good news with Jesus being the one to spring the death is that it means victory for us. At the end, what seems like a failure is instead the ultimate hero's sacrifice to save us all. And it is by our baptism that we are able to take part in this victory. It is through baptism that we are bonded to Jesus' death. And just as strongly, we are bound to what we will see next week in the resurrection. The resurrection from death into life. Thanks to Jesus, we take part in his death, and so we all die. But at the same time, we take part in his resurrection, and so we rise to new life again in him. During this Holy Week, which we begin our celebration of today, this very morning, we take part in those events that lead up to Jesus' death. Today, in the triumphant entrance into Jerusalem. On Maundy Thursday, with the Last Supper with his disciples. And then, finally, on Good Friday, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ on the cross. And even though we are celebrating, we're remembering Jesus' death this week, we will eventually get to that victory. The victory of Christ resurrected for us all. But during your time this week, take the time and stop and live into those events leading up to Jesus' death. Lead into the events of his death and suffering. Take the time to understand that the victory that we will celebrate on next Sunday on Easter was one that was not without a huge cost. And so, as we get ready to celebrate that Easter, to celebrate the celebration of Jesus Christ resurrected for us all, we can take the time and know what it truly cost for us to be resurrected with him. And it is a chance when we take that time, when we take the time to stop and reflect, to be truly thankful for the good, the heroic act that Jesus has done to save us all.